Hi guys, Ronnie here and welcome back to the workshop. Today I'm going to talk about my time trial bike, which normally is my most special and important bike that I own. Unfortunately this year the situation got a bit complicated with the bike setup and time trialing itself. So there was a bit of confusion about that, and also people wondering why I'm riding this bike on Instagram, etc. So today I decided to clear that all up. Last time I've shown you my road bike setup in its most up-to-date form, so you can watch that over here. And then I based a poll on the YouTube community site that I have, and then of course you chose the time trial bike, so that's what I'm going to do next. Now, a bit of a heads up about me. This year I'm sponsored by Factor Bikes, so I should be riding Factor Bikes as well, all of my bikes, which I do for the most part. The road bike is the Ostro VAM, as I've shown you earlier. The gravel bike is the LS, and I love both of those bikes. The time trial bike should have been the new Hanzo. Unfortunately, there has been a dispute with the supplier of the aero bars for this bike with the manufacturer that was supposed to supply them to Factor. I'm not actually sure how much of this information is public, so I'm going to leave it with that. Because of this thing, Factor had to design a brand new front end for the bike, which took, designing a brand new product from the ground up always takes time. And because of this, I just wasn't able to get my frame set. It was supposed to arrive in March, so in time for the season, but because of this delay I still don't have it. Back last year I had the Shiv TT time trial bike, which I'm sure plenty of you know already. That was an excellent bike. It was fully kitted out. I had custom extensions on it, very good CDA, etc. And because of the bike shortage, there were customers literally queuing up and bidding on the price on that bike. So I'll be honest, out of pure greed, I sold that bike back in November, assuming that everything will be fine, which then wasn't. And then around March I saw this Cervelo P5 frame set on sale in the shop, and I just thought, well, it's better to have something, I guess. And the P5 is an excellent frame, one of the fastest ones in fact. So I just went ahead and bought it, which I don't normally do because I'm a bike dealer, so usually I stick to the brands that I sell. Anyway, P5 it is. That's the short story behind it. I thought that this is going to be temporary. Unfortunately, because of the issues mentioned earlier, it dragged through the whole season with now pretty much no important time trials left. So yeah, it is what it is, but still it turned out to be a pretty great setup. And again, because some supply issues, I had to stick to some other parts that I originally wanted to. So without further ado, let's get through the bike setup in detail. Okay, so this is the actual bike. As you can see, pretty standard Cervelo P5 time trial bike. Of course, it does come with all kinds of triathlon gubbins that are included with the frame, which I didn't use, of course. For time trialing they're more or less irrelevant, but they're pretty handy, to be honest. Overall, this is a very well designed frame, I have to say. My favorite feature is the adjustable stack with the riser setup, super easy adjustments. So I think all bikes should have that. The Hanzo has that, which is great. No finicky spacers and 10 different kinds of bolts for each length, etc. Really just a very neat, straightforward setup, and same goes for the rest of the bike as well. One thing that's a tiny bit atypical is the BB right bottom bracket. It's an asymmetric standard, not that common, only Cervelo and some Factor frames use it incidentally. but yeah, no big deal there either. So that's pretty much it for the frame set itself. We know it's a fast bike, one of the fastest, so I just went ahead and bought it. So let's start with the component choices themselves. So some of the most obvious ones. I have the head wheels from last year, so this is the Vanquish RC8 Pro, which is a very fast wheel, extremely stable in the wind. I really like that, so of course I would stick to that. And then paired with a Vanquish disc rear wheel, very fast combination, also very sturdy. I've been using these in training for the past 2 seasons with no issues whatsoever, no truing or servicing needed. I have ceramic speed coated bearings in both of them with very light grease, and despite that I didn't need to touch them ever since. So I think that's also down to the thing that I tend to mention quite often, but head wheel bearings hubs use large diameter 6902 sized bearings, which makes them much larger than other brands do use. This is also a bit heavier, but they're just heavy duty and basically indestructible, so kudos for that. The group set, as you would expect, is Dura-Ace Di2 throughout. It's still on 11 speed at the time of recording this video, but this group set has actually been sold a couple of days ago, so I'm going to change that for 12 speed, which I'm going to show you on video hopefully. With the time trial bike there really isn't much of a difference, because the brake levers, the brakes, the hydraulics all stay the same. Same for the shift buttons, etc. And the whole cabled part actually is just disconnected from the junction and connected to the new SD300 wiring standard with an adapter, and then you put on the 2 mechs, the cassette chain, etc. and off you go. So basically it's a very straightforward swap. And of course you have to use the new battery, the SD300, so that's all. Hopefully it won't take more than an hour, but I'm really looking forward to that, because the new 12-speed cassette, even though it's 1130, it has nice and even jumps, which is handy when you're time trialing. And it was the reason I'm using the non-standard SRAM Red 11 to 28 cassette, because I just prefer the steps, but it doesn't shift as nice as the Dura-Ace one. So yeah, a bit of a mix match right there. The elephant in the room with this bike is the cockpit. Now the standard cockpit, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Okay, so this is the cockpit and the front end setup you normally get in Cervelo P5, or at least with the previous versions of the frame. Now this is called the EX11 riser post. As you can see, it has this seat post like shape which you slide up and down in the frame. That gives you your stack adjustment. Then you have this kind of a fork design, very reminiscent of this track speed concept, the earlier version. And by loosening this bolt you can adjust the reach adjustment, and then you of course have different mounting options for the arm pads. And there are 2 problems with this. So firstly, in my case at least, a problem, not a huge one but a problem nevertheless, is that you can't slide the armrests all the way together, which for me is not ideal, because usually that's how I get my lowest CDA and I can ride in that position perfectly fine. The second thing, as you can see, that the rise you get with the standard version of the extensions is very shallow, which normally wouldn't be a problem, because there is also, well, this is a 30-degree extension, there's also a 50 available, and that would solve pretty much all of my issues. But this being 2022, I couldn't get that anywhere in the world, which is kind of inconvenient, so I had to look for another solution. The problem in this one, I still got a pretty fast position on it, but I had to use these Watch-Shop hooked extension ends or bar plugs, and I could only hold the bar with my pinky finger, and that's not very stable on rough roads and in crosswinds, and just not very nice in general to ride like that. But it's okay if you have fully custom molded aero bars where you can actually rest your forearms on the whole length, but here it was very limited, so I just wanted to have another option. Now Cervelo have updated this design due to the lack of adjustability to the thing you can see, well, sort of on here. So this is the EX10 riser post, and if you buy a P5 these days, then it comes with basically an extension mount very similar to what Tririg is using with their Dragonfly units. So it's essentially a clamp that enables you to clamp, well, standard extensions, and then you can put the elbow pads on top. This is standard Cervelo hardware. It comes with the 2022 frame sets. You put it here and then it just kind of tilts. And you can adjust it in a myriad of ways, and it's basically what everyone is using these days on these bikes. But guess what? Since this is 2022, I couldn't get one of those either. And the idea was for me that due to the lack of time and generally constrained options, I would design my own unit, which I can then use for testing to make it, well, as widely adjustable as possible. And then based on that, I would have Speco, the guys that have done my road bike handlebar, they would make a set of custom extensions for this bike, which would be all very nice in one piece together with the riser post, etc. Same thing you can see on the Jumbo Visma bikes. Well, there have been problems with that as well. Now the original plan was to just take this EX11, cut off the seat post part, or the slider post part, I guess, and manufacture a cradle, which essentially we did, this large chunk of aluminum. It turned out to be pretty nice. Yeah, it holds the extensions, it holds the IT junction box, etc. It works. It has options for the armrests. So it kind of works, but the problem with that was, for some reason, Cervelo designed this riser post in a way that it kind of shifts around when you tighten it, and we didn't take that into consideration. So if I were to actually cut this down and glue this thing on, the angle would be mismatched, so it was facing downwards. And since at that point there really wasn't too much time at all, we decided to just cut off the part that would slide in the shaft and be bonded together. We cut that off and we flattened it out, and we made this little wedge shape, which would then fit on an EX10 riser post, which in the meantime I have managed to get. So yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare, but it works, and it's not super aero, it has a lot of stack, etc. It needs refining, that's for sure. For example, we didn't have time to anodize it, we didn't have time to take a different approach to the spacers here, so the bolts are not sticking out, etc. But then we arrived with this setup at the point that was so close to the nationals that I just didn't have time anymore to make the custom extensions, so I just had to stick with this. I did some testing on it, I found a relatively good position, but it wasn't, well, very good compared to what I had on the ship. But at that point there really wasn't much I could do about it. So that's the story with how my front end ended up like this. And it's not ideal, but it's what you have. The key takeaway from here is that you have a tried and tested race bike, particularly for time trials. You don't sell it until you have the replacement fully dialed in. But that was my mistake. I did it so you don't have to. Anyway, for the rest of the components, these are Watchshop bar and plugs. As I said, in order to be able to use these, I couldn't use the standard SVR 9160 shifters. So I just used sprint shifters from Shimano. These are, well, a bit easier to actuate and have more flexibility in terms of the mounting points. These are tri-rig extensions and 51 Speedshop armrest cups, which are a very popular product of our shop because I don't think anyone else imports them in Europe. Then the base bar, of course, is a standard Cervelo base bar with the Shimano brake levers. One thing that's very neat about the Cervelo base bar is that you have these built-in grips, which are, well, nice and rubbery and grippy and blend in perfectly with the handlebars, so there's no aero penalty there, and it's just much better than regular bar tape. So yeah, good idea in itself. Then if you look at the rest of the bike, well, I think the most important bits were covered already. The rotors, one thing I did change from previous year is that the rotor is now 140 on the front. I also have this Revolver Wheelworks Aero cover on there. I didn't use it at the Nationals because it's kind of debatable whether it is UCI legal or not, so I just took it off just to be sure. But normally I'm using that and it just kind of looks cool, to be honest. Further down the bike you'll see this Gorilla bottle cage. Obviously I don't use that for racing, that's just for training and convenience. One pretty good thing about this bike is that unlike on the Shift TT, you can actually use multiple bottles. So you can have one here, obviously, and you can have one here on the top tube, which is, well, not as neat as it could be. It's not a perfect place for a bottle, but with my setup I have no other options. Further down I have the crankset, which is, well, new for this year. I've already shown you the Power2 Max L230s. I use these on all my bikes and they work great together with the Power2 Max power meter. I also have the new Wahoo Speed Play pedals. It's kind of a staple for me in the aero version. I have these both on this bike and the road bike. Now the chainring, that's a bit of a difference compared to what I use normally. I have been using Pyramid Cycle Designs chainrings in the past seasons, but again, due to availability, I just had to source this one. It's a 60 tooth, so it's what I normally use. So no big differences there. Chain security has been excellent. Also, as you can see, the finish and the anodizing is extremely hard wearing. I already have around 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers on this and it's just barely showing any sign of wear. So that's good. Then saddle wise, I do get a lot of questions regarding this saddle. So this is a Dash TT9 combo saddle, which I had on the Shiv with the Dash combo seat post. And the interesting thing about it is it has no rails, so it just slides around on this channel and it's just super neat, very light, very aero, etc. This fairing, well, it's not really a fairing because it's part of a saddle, but it acts as a splitter, so should reduce drag minimally. And the reason I'm using this, because originally I was planning to use the Repente Magnet, which is slightly more stable and comfortable. But the reason I stuck to the Dash, it's kind of a ad hoc situation with that. So the Cervelo seat post and the frame set in general comes with a ton of different parts, as I said. But one thing they don't include is an attachment for oval saddle rails. So in the heat of the moment when I was building up this bike, I realized I can't put a saddle on it because I didn't have any saddle with metal rails. By the way, it's the Ritchie seat post head that slides on this, well, flat section of the seat post. It has a mile of adjustment, so hugely adjustable. Also, it has this opening up here, which you can use for triathlon attachments, or could use if you didn't have this splitter saddle. Anyway, that was kind of frustrating, and honestly in the heat of the moment I didn't really know what to do. And then I realized that well, I have this saddle, so why not try and fit it just straight on instead of the Ritchie seat post head, or well, that would normally go. And it worked. As you can see, I've been using it ever since. One thing you don't get this way is that, well, when you use a specific dash combo seat post, it does have a little section similar to this, so you can adjust the tilt of the saddle. This way it's basically locked in a level position because obviously there is no adjustment for it. But yeah, it works as it is, so I'm happy with it, and it has been on ever since. So yeah, that's another interesting point. Regarding the rest of the drivetrain, the chain is Dura Ace with the Silca hot melt box. I've been using it for the past year or so, works great. The cassette I already mentioned, that's a red 22 cassette. On the rear mech I do have this SLF Motion aero cage. I've said previously that I prefer this to ceramic suite because it's actual full carbon plate, not just fiber reinforced plastic, so it's much more sturdy, and also comes with the now not very up-to-date Nationals colors that I no longer possess, but hey, the part itself is kind of cool. I've also purchased a direct mount derailleur hanger from, well, Sugai, whatever it is pronounced, because I don't know, I have a weird fetish for direct mount hangers. I put them on all of my bikes because they're cool. And I ordered this one because I was hoping it would match the color of the frame, which, as you can probably see, that really it doesn't. But yeah, that's just a cosmetic thing. Anyway, the whole bike is a bit botched and doesn't look as great as setups that I usually run, but it is what it is. It's kind of fast, not as fast as it could be, but yeah, this year it's been like that. Anyway, these are all the hard bits I think covered. One final thing that I get asked a lot about are the tires. So previously I've been using the Veloflex Records, which I really do like, and then I started using the Michelin Power Time Trials, and I found these to be, well, a lot more grippy and durable. So now I'm on these. Also, they're quite a bit wider, so they're a better match for the very wide head wheels. Although I did test the Veloflex tires back to back with the Notio, and I couldn't pick out a significant difference in terms of aerodynamics, but yeah, it just feels better to have more rubber on there, particularly with rough roads. On smooth roads, the records pumped up to a higher pressure are probably going to be faster. So yeah, that's pretty much it regarding the bike setup. As for the Nationals, I'll probably do a breakdown of that race as well. Some people are wondering about the power numbers and that it wasn't great, etc., but I can assure you that that's just not the case. It wasn't a flat course, so you can't compare it apples to apples. I used the file from Best Bike Split to push more on the hills and take a bit of a rest on the downhills, so that's why the total aggregate average power wasn't great, but it was the optimal pacing and it was the maximum I could do on the day, so no issues with that. Anyway, this is the bike that I was not supposed to race, and I did. So this is how it turned out. And I will be probably parting my ways with it soon anyway, because now the Factor Hanzo, the bike that I've been waiting for a long time now, should hopefully arrive, and then I can have it fully dialed for next season, together with the custom cockpit, etc., all the bells and whistles, so we come back faster next year. Okay, so that's been it regarding the time trial bike. I hope you have found this entertaining or useful in some way. If you'd like to know more about my other bike setups, or just generally the stuff that I use for my training and racing, don't forget to tune into the channel and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.